Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
Imagine for a second, right? You're just sitting on your couch, scrolling through your feed, and you clause on this viral post.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Right. And the headline is just screaming at you in these bold, flashing letters. It says America's top nuclear and space scientists are vanishing or, turning up dead.
Which is an incredibly alarming thing to see on your screen.
Exactly. And it asks you this question that immediately just hooks your brain. It's like, is this some elaborate enemy plot to cripple the United States? Or is it something else entirely?
I mean, it is the ultimate digital rabbit hole, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
You've got government secrets, national security, unexplained disappearances, and highly intelligent people meeting tragic ends. It's almost, precision engineered to capture human attention.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just a fringe Reddit thread anymore.
No, it's everywhere.
Right. This narrative has completely broken containment. It is actively dominating the national news cycle right now.
It really is.
So today, we are looking at deep investigative reporting from CBS News and CNN, along with some really sharp cultural analysis from The Atlantic.
And we definitely need that analysis to make sense of this.
Yeah, because our mission today in this deep dive is to cut through all that deafening internet noise. We're looking at the FBI's actual investigation into the deaths and disappearances of these 10 scientists and staff members, all supposedly connected to secretive U.S. government laboratories.
Right.
We have to answer the core question here. How do we separate a genuine national security threat from an internet conspiracy theory that's just, fueled by coincidence?
That is the crucial question. And to answer it, we really have to resist the urge to look at this as one big, blurry, cinematic poster.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
We have to examine the individual data points on their own merits, before we try to draw a red string between them on a corkboard.
I completely agree. But, I'm looking at this timeline, and I'm honestly just confused. How do 10 completely random people suddenly become a cohesive international espionage theory?
Right. Where did this specific panic even start?
Well, it started with a single match thrown into a powder keg.
Okay.
Before the internet started compiling this big list of 10 individuals, there was one specific disappearance that captured the public imagination. It really kicked off this current wave of speculation.
So who was it?
We have to look at the case of retired Air Force Major General William Neal McCasland.
Okay, so what exactly happened to him?
Well, he's 68 years old, and in late February of this year, he vanished from his home in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Just vanished.
Just vanished. But the details are what really sent the internet into overdrive here. When he left his house, he left behind his cell phone.
Wow.
Yeah, he left his wearable tech. He even left his prescription glasses.
Wait, his glasses?
Right. And according to the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, the only things he took with him were his wallet, a pair of hiking boots, and a .38 caliber revolver.
Wait, hold on. He leaves his glasses and his phone, but takes a revolver.
I mean, that immediately sounds like someone in severe distress, right? Not like a covert spy operation.
Exactly. It points to a personal crisis. And the physical evidence is just incredibly sparse.
Did they search the area?
Extensively. Search and rescue teams deployed drones. They used K-9 units, and all they found was a gray U.S. Air Force sweatshirt.
Where was that?
It was recovered about 1.25 miles east of his home on March 7th. But beyond that sweatshirt, absolutely no trace of him.
That's just so sad. I mean, a 68-year-old man walking out of his house and vanishing is a terrible tragedy. But unfortunately, families deal with missing persons cases every day.
They do, yeah.
Why did this specific man turn into a national obsession overnight?
It all comes down to his resume. General McCasland is a former commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know anything about internet lore, Wright-Patterson is essentially the holy grail.
Exactly.
It's the base that's been long rumored to house the extraterrestrial debris from the Roswell incident.
Right. So you take a former commander of that specific base, you add a mysterious disappearance where he leaves his digital footprint behind, and the algorithms just do the rest.
They just run with it.
They absolutely run with it.
Yeah.
The Atlantic highlighted how fast this escalated, noting that novelist Walter Kern publicly stated the situation, quote, seems to be an enemy action.
Wow.
So almost instantly, a missing persons case morphed into an international espionage or UFO event.
But while the internet is out there, like writing spy thrillers, you have this incredibly grounded, heartbreaking reality playing out with his family.
You do. It's terrible.
His wife, Susan, actually took to Facebook to actively push back against the frenzy.
Yeah, she was very vocal.
She used this dark, sharp humor to point out the absurdity of it all. She wrote that he had absolutely no special knowledge of ET bodies.
Right.
She even joked that, considering there was no sign of him, maybe aliens beamed him up to the mothership.
Which is such a strong response.
Yeah, and then she dryly noted that no motherships had been seen hovering over the Sandia Mountains.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of why the public ignored her.
Right, because they totally ignored her.
Completely. And it's because human beings are deeply uncomfortable with randomness, especially when it involves people we perceive as powerful.
That makes sense.
A high-ranking military official disappearing without a trace is terrifying. It implies that chaos can touch anyone. So people actually prefer a grand, villainous plot.
Because a massive conspiracy implies that someone, somewhere, is in control.
Exactly. The unsettling reality is that people, even highly cleared individuals, can suffer a medical emergency or a mental health crisis and just vanish.
It's like the internet is playing 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
But instead of actors, they're using classified government laboratories to force a connection. The algorithm isn't looking for the truth, it's just playing a game of connect the dots to keep people clicking.
Yeah.
They are desperate to link a missing 68-year-old man to alien debris, completely ignoring the family, telling them to stop.
And that pattern matching didn't stay contained to social media. It rapidly traveled all the way up the chain to the highest levels of the United States government.
Which is wild, because if this was just random Reddit users, I'd get it. But this paranoia leaked into actual government policy. Let's look at how Washington reacted.
Yeah, and real quick, just to give the listeners some crucial context here.
Good point. Let's make this very clear.
We are looking at reactions from officials on both the left and the right sides of the political aisle.
Right.
We aren't endorsing any of these politicians' views, obviously, but we strictly and impartially need to look at what they're saying to understand the massive scale of this panic. We're just reporting what the sources convey.
Exactly. We are entirely impartial here. We just need to read the data off the gauges to see how hot this is running.
And it is running very hot. The FBI is officially mobilizing.
Wow.
Director Kash Patel stated that the FBI is spearheading a probe, and they're teaming up with the Department of Energy and the Department of War.
So it's a massive interagency effort.
It's huge. Over at the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt put out a statement saying, "No stone will be unturned."
Okay.
You even have President Donald Trump addressing the media, calling the situation pretty serious stuff and expressing hope that it's random.
So the executive branch is fully involved. What about Congress? What are they saying?
Lawmakers are treating it as a definitive crisis. Representative James Comer, the Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, flat out called it a national security threat.
Those are strong words.
Very, very strong. He said, "It is very unlikely that this is a coincidence, and this urgency is crossing party lines too."
Really?
Yeah. Democrat Representative James Walkinshaw agreed a federal probe is absolutely warranted, though he did publicly doubt a coordinated motive.
I even saw that Republican Representative Eric Burleson is pushing the perimeter of the investigation back to 2024.
Yes, I saw that.
He's urging the FBI to look into the death of Matthew James Sullivan. He was a former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer and a UFO whistleblower who died by suicide just weeks before he was scheduled to testify.
Right. And Burleson is openly calling that suicide suspicious.
So you have the full weight of the federal apparatus leaning into the idea that there might be a connection.
Yeah.
But when CBS News and CNN actually interviewed the scientific and intelligence community—
The people actually running the labs.
Exactly. The people who study nuclear security for a living, the pushback was immense.
Wait, I'm confused. If the FBI director is stepping in and Congress is calling it a national security threat, there has to be something to this, right?
You'd think so.
So why are the scientific experts telling Washington to pump the brakes?
Because the experts are looking at Washington and saying, you are fundamentally misunderstanding how our infrastructure works.
Oh, so.
Well, Scott Roker, the vice president for nuclear materials security at the Nuclear Threat Initiative, brought up a vital point. He acknowledged that when people hear dead nuclear scientists, their brains immediately go to Iran.
Right, because Iranian nuclear scientists actually have been systematically assassinated. That's exactly where my mind went. Exactly, but Roker points out a crucial difference in scale. Iran's program is highly concentrated.
Right.
The United States has thousands upon thousands of scientists. We have a massive redundant infrastructure. Roker stated there would be absolutely nothing strategic that a foreign adversary could achieve by taking out 10 of our scientists.
It wouldn't even cause a ripple.
No, it wouldn't even dent the U.S. nuclear or space programs. A former Department of Energy official bluntly told CBS News, quote, "People do just die. Strokes, heart disease, suicide, mugging. It happens."
So what does this all mean? If energy and security experts are saying there's zero strategic value in this and that it's just the grim reality of statistics, why are the FBI and Congress dedicating so many resources to it?
It comes down to a concept called the institutional duty of care.
Okay, what is that?
Think about Los Alamos, JPL, Wright-Patterson. These facilities employ more than 20,000 people combined.
That's a huge workforce.
Right. Imagine working at one of those labs right now. You are seeing the same viral conspiracies as everyone else, wondering if you're being targeted by a foreign hit squad.
I'd be terrified going to work.
Exactly. So even if the intelligence community knows the probability of a foreign plot is near zero, the government cannot just tweet out, "It's fine, don't worry."
Oh, I see.
They have to conduct a rigorous, highly visible investigation to comprehensively rule out espionage and maintain the psychological security of their workforce.
So they essentially have to prove a negative.
Precisely. They have to show they are taking it seriously.
Okay, to really see how absurd this algorithmic grouping is,
Yeah.
let's stop treating these 10 people as a monolith.
We definitely need to do that.
When you actually look at the disparate realities of their lives, the whole spy thriller narrative just completely falls apart. Let's look at the cases that actually involve foul play.
Let's do it.
These are murders, but the context shows us exactly how the internet strips away facts to build a narrative.
Take Nuno Loureiro, for example. He was a brilliant plasma physics professor at MIT who was shot and killed at his home.
And if you just read the headline, "MIT plasma physicist murdered," your mind races to espionage.
Right. But he wasn't assassinated by a spy. He was killed by a jealous former classmate named Claudio Neves Valente.
Oh, wow.
And the horrific, crucial context here is that Valente was on a rampage. He had committed a mass shooting at Brown University the very day before.
So we're looking at a tragic case of domestic mass gun violence, not a foreign hit squad.
Exactly.
But what about the Caltech astrophysicist Carl Grillmeyer?
Very similar dynamic. He was shot to death on his own front porch.
That is awful.
It is. But he was killed by a 29-year-old stranger who had just been released from prison under a controversial unnecessary prosecutions law.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this was a catastrophic failure of the local justice system, not international espionage.
Okay, so the internet took two horrific, completely unrelated local crimes and forced them into the same bucket. But what about the disappearances? How do those fit in? Because, people just vanishing into thin air feels a lot more suspicious.
It feels suspicious until you look at the terrain and the circumstances. Take Monica Jessenton Reza. She was a 60-year-old aerospace engineer at JPL.
Okay.
She vanished while hiking in the incredibly rough terrain of Los Angeles County. Experienced hikers go missing in that wilderness all the time.
But then you have the two disappearances linked to Los Alamos in New Mexico.
Right.
Melissa Casillas and Anthony Chavez. How do the algorithms try to spin them?
Well, let's look at Melissa Casillas. She was a 53-year-old administrative assistant. Her niece specifically pointed out to the media that Melissa did not even have high-level security clearance.
That's a pretty important detail to leave out.
Extremely important. She was last seen on surveillance footage walking alone on a highway with a backpack, and she left behind a phone that had been factory reset.
Wait, she factory reset her own phone before walking off?
Yes, she did.
I mean, that detail alone speaks to a deeply personal intention or some severe crisis.
Yeah.
Not a random kidnapping by a foreign adversary.
Exactly. And then you have Anthony Chavez. He was 78 years old.
Wow, okay.
He was a retired foreman who used to supervise construction at Los Alamos. He vanished, and police noted absolutely no signs of foul play.
It's just so frustrating to see how these algorithms work. They grab the phrase Los Alamos from a retired construction foreman's resume and use it to link his disappearance to an MIT professor murdered by a mass shooter.
It's incredibly disingenuous.
And it gets even worse when you look at the personal tragedies and illnesses on this list.
It really does. You have Jason Thomas, a researcher for Novartis, whose body was recovered from a lake.
What happened there?
His wife publicly stated he had been profoundly distraught following the recent deaths of both of his parents.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking.
It is. Then you have Amy Eskridge, a co-founder of the Institute for Exotic Science, who suffered from severe chronic pain. Her family had to issue a public statement asking people to realize that scientists die also, and begging the public not to make too much of this.
The fact that grieving families have to put out PR statements to stop internet sleuths is just grim.
It's a horrible position to put them in. And then there is Michael David Hicks, a physicist with NASA's JPL, who died at age 59 while struggling with known pre-existing medical issues.
Didn't his daughter say something about the rumors?
Yeah, his daughter Julia, she gave an interview that I think captures the bizarre nature of this whole situation perfectly.
What did he say?
She said there is no train of logic that would implicate her dad in a federal investigation. She mentioned the speculation has her shaken up, noting she, quote, can't help but laugh about it, but at the same time, it's getting serious.
That seriousness is compounded by how the internet deliberately manipulates job titles to fuel the paranoia.
Oh, absolutely.
If you attach the phrase nuclear facility to a job, it instantly sounds like James Bond.
Right.
Take Stephen Garcia, another man who went missing in Albuquerque. He worked for the National Nuclear Security Administration, yes, but he was reportedly a property custodian.
Exactly.
He managed physical property and supplies. It is a vital job, but he wasn't harboring launch codes in his living room.
No, he wasn't.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We are basically taking puzzle pieces from 10 completely different boxes.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is.
We have a victim of a mass shooter, a hiker lost in the woods, a man grieving his parents, a woman struggling with chronic pain, and a retired construction foreman.
Right.
We dump all these unrelated pieces onto a table, and the internet algorithms are forcing us to jam them together to make one single terrifying picture.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this entire phenomenon is a glaring indictment of our modern information ecosystem.
It really is.
We are drowning in data, and algorithms reward engagement, not accuracy. The narrative of 10 assassinated scientists generates millions of clicks and forces a federal investigation.
Because it's exciting.
Yes. The narrative of 10 separate families grieving mundane, unconnected tragedies does not.
Right.
We are witnessing how easily natural human suffering can be co-opted, stripped of its context, and repackaged to serve a grand, entertaining internet narrative.
It's treating real life like a movie.
Exactly. It demands that we apply critical thinking, that we look at the granular, unglamorous facts, rather than passively accepting the cinematic fiction fed to our screens.
And that is exactly why this deep dive matters to you, listening right now.
Absolutely.
This isn't just a story about scientists or government labs.
Yeah.
It is a real-time case study in how the media ecosystem you interact with every single day actually functions.
It's a mirror.
Right. It highlights how vital it is to resist that very human urge to find a cinematic pattern in the messy chaos of real life. Because when we force those patterns, we aren't just spreading misinformation.
No, the stakes are much higher than that.
We are actively disrespecting the actual personal tragedies being experienced by these grieving families. Behind every one of those viral posts is a wife, a daughter, or a niece watching their loved one's worst day be turned into a cheap internet mystery.
We have to remember the human cost of these digital rabbit holes.
We really do. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to chew on. We spent all this time analyzing whether foreign adversaries are covertly taking out our scientists.
Right.
But what if the real national security threat isn't a foreign hit squad at all? What if the actual threat is that our own information ecosystem has become incredibly fragile? Think about it. If the tragic everyday deaths of American citizens can be this easily weaponized into a full-blown national security panic by internet algorithms and social media sleuths?
What happens when a real coordinated crisis actually occurs?
Exactly. Will we even be able to tell the difference?
It's a terrifying thought.
It really is. So next time you are scrolling and you see that viral claim flashing at you, just remember the broken puzzle pieces.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.